Hello, everyone. Welcome to Startup Stories. I'm Christina Moffatt, and I am joined by Diana Wright today. You have heard that right. You have both of us on the podcast today. We are going to be recapping on some things that we saw in 2021 and looking forward to 2022. So, Diana, thanks for being here with me today.
Yeah, this will be a lot of fun. So, Christina, I'm going to jump right in. Looking back throughout the last 12 months, really, what's the biggest thing that has stood out for you as far as a trend as it relates to entrepreneurship here in the region?
Yeah, so I think coming off of 2020, I always say entrepreneurs are scrappy. So when they don't have a paycheck coming in, they've got to figure out how to get that paycheck. So I think the biggest thing that I saw was them really, I always counsel them on branching out on the revenue streams, but we really saw entrepreneurs really being creative and branching out on revenue streams. Some of those, a lot of them went to online. So it was a great opportunity when your front doors are closed. A lot of them were really trying to get online in 2020, but I feel like a lot of them really excelled in 2021 at the online game. So dipping the toe in the water 2020 and really just taking off in 2021. Mm-hmm. The other thing I really think entrepreneurs got really good at is how to be very efficient in shorter hours. So you have no staff to stay open. You've got to really nail down on how you're going to make money to cover your overhead. And I really think, Diana, I think that trend is going to stick with the shorter hours. Mm-hmm. I know that you counsel too, and we see people, it's, a delicate balance of work life. And a lot of them found out, hey, if they can be more profitable and more efficient in those hours that they're open and be able to have a family life, I feel like that was a really big win that I think we'll continue to see shorter hours for people.
Yeah. And I feel like kind of going with that, like home base. And I know you work with a lot of home based businesses, but also like remote. And so because of like what we all learned, we can work from home. And sometimes it's more efficient. I know with families, sometimes it's maybe not. And then there's like, I've seen just working out at Gravitate over the summer, there was actually a pretty decent uptick, I think, after people felt comfortable coming out from COVID, even though yet kind of still are back in. But that's something too that I'm seeing more is remote businesses. And maybe that's always been the case, but it seems like it's more popular with COVID and the pandemic.
I really, really agree with you on that one. Home-based, from home-based offices, I had a small business client tell me that now 85% of her clients are outside of Iowa because everybody got used to working with people online. So I feel it's great. Location's no longer a barrier for people to be able to grow their businesses, but you kind of hit the nail on the head. The home-based food was huge this year. Everybody developed that hobby during 2020 and decided to stick with it. And I know we did our home-based food workshop for the first time this year. We did the 2-part session, and we had 44 companies, 44 home-based food companies get on there. So I think that home-based business, whether it's food, whether it's people moving out of the office space they were renting, or I know you and I both have seen a ton of freelancing kind of shoot out of there, of people really being able to sell themselves back to their companies that are short-staffed now, but working a flexible schedule that can be home-based. I really think that trend's going to stick. And I've talked to the chambers a lot about new members. Where do you find them? You're going to have to look at homes as an option.
Yep. Yeah, I would agree. And I know even kind of going back to talking about remote, at least in the startup community, as far as like investors and deal flow, so many pitches were done. I know in 2020, it actually had nationwide a record year for venture capital. And those all took place a lot of times over Zoom. So it's pretty crazy also what has been happening and just the access that people have to the investor community, but also investors just to people, and you just pick up on a Zoom call. It's at least right now, I think they're still doing that in a lot of the screening, but I think now people are still really looking for a little bit of that relationship building is pretty key when you're going to put money into a company. And so we're kind of seeing that come back a little bit too.
Do you feel too, Diana, that some of that surge, I feel like people really got behind passions of theirs more so than really, I feel like people have always been cautious, but I see more people jumping in, starting a business and or supporting businesses because it's a passion. Do you think that some of that funding was accelerated because people are willing to get behind passion projects?
I definitely think like investors typically will invest in what they know. And so sometimes that is out of passion, I think. And then also just seeing that people are trying to find problems that are purposeful in solving. That's something that I think in general, a lot of these entrepreneurs who are betting on themselves, like they kind of rewound and were like, okay, realizing what time is and that, you need to make it meaningful in the kind of short amount of time sometimes people have in their day to day, what was purposeful to them, and how they actually looked at even work-life balance. What would you say you kind of saw on that front of just even, I know we've talked about it, but the startup and the small business mental health space, like where are you seeing that as you're talking with clients and different entrepreneurs?
Yeah, mental health was a big thing. I feel a lot of times that I was the first call for things. They don't really want to talk to their spouse or partner or support system. They really can't talk to their employees about what they're facing. I really feel like it's still something that we need to focus on. People are still struggling. The funding is now stopping. There's not PPP. The EIDL loans are pretty much given out. There's not really other funding coming. And when that funding stops, it's when the hard work begins. It's when that strain really comes to the business owners. And a lot of people really struggling, taking care of youngers, taking care of olders, trying to get them to appointments and stuff like that. But also, a lot of them are not back to their pre-COVID numbers. They don't have the staff to get back there. And so that weighs on their mental health a lot of trying to maintain that overhead and, heat and cool bills and telephone bills and, paying their rent. None of that has gone down. It's all been the same price. So I think that's something that we need to continue to talk about. I've seen from a lot of small business owners that now that the discussion started, they feel way more comfortable that everyone's going through it together. It's not the stigma. It's really the trauma's not over, right? It's knowing, do we do masks? Do we not do masks? What do you do with your employees? And what do you do with your family as far as vaccines? All of that is constantly weighing on them. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a trend we'll continue to see as people hopefully continue to monitor and continue to talk about their mental health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you kind of hit on how there's certain entrepreneurs and businesses that are still not at what their numbers were pre-COVID as far as revenue and profit. Can you kind of get into that specifically? Like what industries are actually doing well? Because there are certain companies and businesses doing well, but talk about who is experiencing challenges and who are actually kind of thriving because of the new opportunities.
Well, as it relates to Iowa, construction is through the roof. So it doesn't matter really what type of construction, all of it is busy. And 2020, not only were we hit with COVID, but we were also hit with the derecho around here. So a lot of those claims are still going through. I haven't seen any construction company hurting for work at all. That one continues to be okay. But again, they struggle with employees. They need the staff to continue to grow. And sometimes they're hit at a cap. If you don't have the staff to build whatever you need to build, it makes it very difficult. Other areas is any type of consulting continues to thrive. So employers can't seem to find the employees and they're turning to freelancers to be able to do that. And freelancers are very smart to take advantage of that, especially if they can rely on insurance and have the money to cover that. It's a great opportunity right now. I mean, you see a job posting, you probably can go to that company and offer to freelance right now because they're struggling to get people hired. And we hear people who are applying are not qualified. So I think that area is going to continue to really thrive. the ones I think that are still struggling are the ones that have the front doors. So, retail really is struggling. A lot of them, if they're doing online, they're probably doing okay because they can send a lot of that product out the back door and ship it. But we've all seen shipping costs went up and it takes longer to get things there. So need to go back and reevaluate all those costs. And then, of course, the food industry continues to just struggle.
Mhm.
The costs fluctuate all the time. It's a commodity. So you think you got costs down, and the next week they can jump. I think they said like 14% on meat over Thanksgiving time raised. Don't quote me on that, but all of that makes it really hard to run a food business. And same thing, you're struggling with employees, and you've got this. A lot of them have large overhead spaces that just are not full, and you have to play that carry out game too of how do you deliver your product and have it taste great when it gets home. So it's not that it's doom and gloom. It's just always new challenges, I think, in front of them. And the ones that can pivot and hit those challenges and keep going, I think they'll do great. The other ones that aren't willing to pivot, aren't willing to change, are going to struggle.
Yeah. And I would probably add too, I've seen on some of the retail front that the ones that are doing well, they have a really loyal following. And I would assume, like, actually, with a lot of the existing businesses that had taken the time and have a great customer list and even like have a pretty robust marketing strategy, like, I would assume, like, I know when the pandemic hit early on, I went to all of my favorite small businesses because I just have that relationship and it's very local for me. And I have seen some businesses like where they're actually doing okay because of their customers and their following. I don't know how you feel too as an owner. What did you kind of experience?
Yeah, I think you really have to, they always say it's cheaper to, raise what your clients are buying by 10% than it is to go chase new customers. And again, there's so much noise out there, right? Because we're all trying to listen to the news and all the things happening, and then you're talking to your clients. So why not go talk to the clients that want to listen?
Yep.
So email marketing, I was talking to a marketer and she said by far it worked the best, because if it was an email coming from you and they're a loyal customer, they're going to open it versus posting online and it's lost in the shuffle, right? So I think that you're right. I think you're 100% right in that people who have very loyal customers will continue to survive, and as long as they're talking to their customers. And honesty goes a long way. When I saw people be very honest and they put their faces on their business or their employees' faces and said, hey, this is who you're supporting and this is what's really happening, I feel like people just came out of the woodwork to support people.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. So let's see, what else do we want to talk about? I guess I would like to ask you, like, what current and future projects excite you?
For me, I think it's we've got a lot going on in supplier diversity. That was really an area that we came out with this year. So our corporate classes for buyers that were looking to hire small businesses, minority small businesses, really, I think we had 36 buyers at the first class. So it shows how much our companies really want to support and buy local, especially when the supply chain is disrupted. Why not buy it from your backyard? But then the small businesses on the other side really wanting to learn how to sell to the bigger companies, and just knowing how to intentionally make those connections has been awesome. So I look forward to continuing that conversation, keeping the money here and local, and being able to grow our small businesses and help our big businesses too make some new connections. So I think that for 2022, that's definitely one of the things I'm most excited about. And following those home-based food businesses that I mentioned, I mean, 44 businesses, some of those are going to come out and do awesome things and are really taking it serious to get to the next steps. It'll be really fun to watch them grow and thrive.
Mm-hmm.
How about you? What are you excited about moving forward to 2022?
Something we will be launching just right after the new year is the Iowa Entrepreneurial Innovation Dashboard. And so that's actually going to be rolling out, and it's actually to create a dashboard where the whole Iowa startup community can go and actually see what is the pulse of the startup activity in the state. So it's a project we're working with Clay and Milk, and there will actually be a founder survey that you'll probably hear more about. So that's something that I'm excited about. And there was, of course, a lot of new events last year, even in COVID. I know we were talking about that, and I'm just excited to still kind of put my head in creative space into finding out, what the startup community needs, and how we bring people together. Something I know last year in the summer is we did the summer startup tour, and that was really a much needed tour where we went to the makers, the physical product space, the founders, and even our music community to showcase what was happening, and bringing together the community. So that's something that kind of thinking more on different ways that we can cross collaborate different communities. It doesn't always have to be startups, bringing in small business, but if there's even other kind of pockets of the community that we could work together, those are kind of interested areas that I'm kind of exploring right now. So
I really loved your startup tours because people think startups, they think technology, they kind of think the two worlds don't collide. And since you came with us in April of 2020, I think our worlds have been great. I think we've really overlapped. And just as you mentioned, artists, music, that all is small business. Some of those are startup, definitely, that could spin off into technology out of that. And it was such an amazing event. From your point of view, where do you see startups going next year?
yeah, I mean, a lot kind of happened, even in our region in Iowa. There was a number of acquisitions and exits, which is something that you see as you have a more mature startup community. And we even had a lot of different companies that raised more than 10 million or raised more than 20 million in their rounds. And so I'm actually thinking that, I think next year will bring still a lot more rounds if it relates to investment and capital. I think we're going to see hopefully more shots on goal, which means more startups raising funding. And but I also still see this continuation of a lot of ag tech coming out of our state and out of our region between Ames and Des Moines. And so it's cool to see just naturally a lot of the resources that are here in the community to support the startups, whether it's in fintech or insurance. I know Next Level Ventures just raised a $250 million fund for fintech startups as it relates to the credit union space. And so we saw that come this last year. We also saw ISA Ventures. They created a statewide or a state fund for Iowa startups. And so I think we're just beginning to see from a lot of the different new funds or addition of funding coming, that there'll be even more startups and pockets that we can really bring kind of forward for the state and say, this is what we do well at. And here's, a lot of the businesses that show for that. So I'm excited to see that next year. And then I really hope, this is something more on my wish list, but I would still like to see more women in startups. I think there's a lot of us women who are mentors. Like at the partnership here, we are actually really lucky to have you, myself, Meg, and a number of others that lead and help small businesses and the Entrepreneur Network. And so I would just still like to see more women starting businesses as it relates to even scale up and technology businesses here in Iowa. So what would you like to see next year, Christina?
Yeah, I would echo the women thing has just been phenomenal. I ran my numbers for my end of the year reports, and honestly, I averaged 72% of clients I saw in 2021 were women on average, which is amazing. So that tells me, some data facts that we saw was as high as 30% of women exited the workforce. So I think this is a prime time for them to continue to look at startups, to look at small business. Again, those shortened hours, being able to sell online, freelancing, home-based businesses, it's just prime for them to be able to take off and do a lot of things. The hybrid format. I mean, any of that has just worked well. What did you see with that working well for women last year? The hybrid format. Did you see anything out of that?
Well, I know, particularly out of some of the accelerators that went hybrid, it actually allowed better access for women to participate in programs like that, that traditionally they couldn't, take 6 months of their life away from their family to go live somewhere in an accelerator program. So that's something that I know happened here locally with one of the tech startups accelerators. And I would also say that I think you're right. So women are starting businesses. And I think right now it seems like they're gravitating to their passion, which is awesome. And so it'll be interesting to see, whether they started those as side hustles. I don't know how many of your clients were more on like the side hustle or like going full time into it. But I do think that I've heard the term the great renewal. So we know about this whole great resignation that has happened. And you even just said it, 30% of women leaving the workforce. And I think what's a kind of more positive term towards that is also it's a renewal where women have been able to really decide what do we want and how do we view our time and creating the purpose behind those businesses. So yeah, I think it's really exciting to see that hopefully. But it's also to be aware that I hope women, with 30% leaving the workforce, what does that actually mean if they do not start businesses? So I don't know if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, I think that, a lot of people have reevaluated. So will they go back? Will they dabble in something they like? Will they choose to, stay home? I think a lot of people realize maybe financially they weren't coming out very far ahead, with the kids in daycare. And I know there's been other topics. We just had our legislative breakfast here about affordable housing and things like that. And I think if a lot of these things shake out, it will create an environment. We just have to be able to support people. It's not always go get a good job. It potentially could be go create a really good life, for people. So I'm excited to see that. As we're wrapping up here, Diana, words of wisdom. I really want to hear what trends you think are going to come in the tech world. I feel like every day I read there's, the medical, the ag tech, you kind of hit on all kinds of stuff. What sector do you think is really going to shoot out with some new technologies potentially next year?
I think it's still going to definitely be a little bit in the ag tech space, but I would also say like physical products. It's something that sometimes has a little longer road at getting at, but it's something that people, yes, there is still technology that can be part of it, but I think even just kind of more of the analog and those experiences and products that we crave. So I think that might be an interesting area. And you kind of mentioned it as we've been talking, but company of one. So really, whether it is the freelancing model or, it could be even a service-based business. I think we're still going to see a lot of that happen just because of that need, the talent shortage. And tech can still be part of that. You can have a company of one and have a tech company. So it's pretty interesting to kind of see what's happening there. But yeah, I would say those are a couple of things. So I'll throw the question back at you. What trends do you think are going to happen next year in about less than
So,
one month?
yeah, a couple things we didn't kind of hit on that I think we saw is influencers. So a lot of us small businesses were able to rep products and talk about products and got paid for that. I think everybody's kid right now thinks they're going to be YouTubers. So obviously that is a career that people don't talk about, and that's entrepreneurship. I mean, it really is. So down to whether you're on TikTok or YouTube or using Facebook Live, influencers are potentially entrepreneurs. So different revenue streams sometimes comes back to product based, sometimes, can go into other things. And the other thing I really think that's going to be a trend is these ghost kitchens. So everybody like their food delivered to their door, and you really don't need a full front door for a restaurant. You just need to be able to produce the food. And those are really continuing to pop up all over the US, something here that I've followed very closely. I think that we need more of them here. The ones that we do have right now are kind of overloaded. So we need to create more space for those people. But I think those are two trends that we're going to see that we didn't really touch on moving forward. But
awesome.
Well, I look forward to 2022 with you, Diana. This was so fun just to actually catch up and sit down with you and talk about everything. And we will look forward to hearing more from all our small businesses next year on our Small Business and Startup Story podcast. So thanks for being with us, everybody. We look forward to celebrating 2022 with you.
Yep. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Small Business and Startup Stories DSM. Inspired by these stories, we offer a hub full of resources needed for any small business owner to grow and succeed in Greater Des Moines, Iowa at dsmpartnership.com/small business. Thank you for listening.